Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I mean, look, being an entrepreneur, I would not go through the rest of my life without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, paracetam, oxiracetam, uridine monophosphate, CDP-choline, modafinil, Noopept, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 31 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. This is going to be a quick one on the mighty Adrafinil. We're going to talk about some sublingual dose protocols. This is what I like to use Adrafinil for. It's also convenient for taking in places where, legally modafinil you can't take, depending on how you've procured modafinil, and a host of other things. People think modafinil is the emperor of the afinils, but Adrafinil has a place in the nootropics arsenal. It certainly does. It certainly does for me. I use it often enough, and we are going to talk about it. But check this out. We're running a special on our two guides. Listen, if you're new to nootropics, if you're just kind of coming into the sphere, you're within 1 to 5 years, really, we wrote a guide called Smarter, Better, Faster, a surgical guide to using nootropics for total mental dominance. It lays out everything you can think of, from modafinil to choline sources to taking phenibut surgically to taking PRL-853, stacking it with theanine and vinpocetine. We lay out this stack called the TAU Limitless stack. It's a triacetyluridine-based stack with a bunch of other very powerful components that make essentially the limitless-like effect. It's like, sometimes I'd rather take that than modafinil. It is very, very powerful. Plus, it's an instructional guide on nootropics. It's called Smarter, Better, Faster. Get it at livecortex.com. Also, if you want to know about racetams, we wrote an instructional guide on racetams. It's all the 8 major nootropic racetams, but here's the awesome part. It has 80 plus racetam stacks in it. Phenylparacetam tyrosine stacks, oxiracetam alcar stacks, every other combination of racetam stack stuff you would never find on the web. Very, very powerful stuff. Took me just about 10 years to figure it out. I wrote a guide. It's called the Racetam God Guide. It is the God Guide on racetams. Trust me, you're going to love this thing. Get it at livecortex.com. Both of those are digital. If you've not tried the Cortex stack, we built a stack that's very powerful. Basically, we tried to mimic modafinil. I found I can combine uridine, CDP-choline, and artichoke extract in very particular manners, add a little bit of Bacopa monnieri in it, and get a modafinil-like effect. It's very strong, very motivation-inducing, very speed of processing-inducing, mostly verbal fluency. I took it today, can you tell? I just have no impediment to my brain. That's what Cortex does. Get it at livecortex.com. And then lastly, we do stack consulting. If you're someone in med school and need help on a stack, I can help you formulate it. Basically, the package is $65. Get you 40 minutes with me on a video chat and 15 additional email correspondences. We can formulate your stacks, email your stacks, get you whatever you want, but mostly it's stack optimization and or nootropics questions answered, whatever you want to do. Get it at livecortex.com. Okay. So, Adrafinil. Basically, Adrafinil is modafinil. Except for, you got to take a little higher doses of it than modafinil, and it's got to go through a few metabolic processes before it actually becomes modafinil in your body. But after you administer it, your liver passes it, it passes through your liver, and then your liver has to metabolize it. And then one of the chemical modifications that your liver engages with Adrafinil is turning it into modafinil. So then, you basically get modafinil from taking Adrafinil. So, let me just make that clear. When you take Adrafinil, once it goes through a few of its metabolic processes, you're essentially taking modafinil. The difference is, though, is that, for some folks, they're going to require a little more. The dose range is generally a little higher. So where on modafinil, you might take 20 to 100 milligrams and find your sweet spot somewhere in the middle there, somewhere on the upper end of that. With Adrafinil, you're going to need to take 100 to 350 milligrams, right? And again, everybody's different. Some people respond very favorably to low doses of things, but generally 100 to 350 is kind of the dose range on Adrafinil. It's a very powerful wakefulness-promoting compound like modafinil, so it works on more than likely orexin neurons, these neurons in the brain that inhibit sleep induction. So when you fire those neurons and make them work really, really well, your capacity to hold back sleep or to prevent tiredness, kind of like what caffeine does, just multiple times amplified, is better. And so that's one of the mechanisms of modafinil, working on these orexin neurons that are sleep inhibiting neuropeptides, basically. And so Adrafinil, I believe Adrafinil probably does the same thing, all things considered, especially because it's converting to modafinil in the body. But it's also working on dopamine, increasing extracellular dopamine. It's working on epinephrine release and norepinephrine release. It facilitates the release of serotonin in certain regions of the brain, and it inhibits GABA in other regions of the brain. So it's got sort of a complex, multifaceted compound, but all that equals its profound wakefulness. It's very, very, very You're not stimulated when you take Adrafinil, kind of like modafinil. It's not a stimulant. It's just like, wow, but you are working quickly. But you're working quickly without impediments. You see all that gunk that builds up in your brain throughout the day and that you might have to deal with, and it might prevent you from being awesome. A compound like modafinil and Adrafinil basically just clear it out. I mean, you're functioning awesome at top speed with no impediments. It's like firing on all cylinders but feeling normal. It's really, really an interesting experience. Very, very powerful compound. So that's the effect. That's the dose range. I want to give you a quick sublingual strategy, because I found that's the best way. Then we'll talk about how this is a convenient compound to use. This is why it's so useful to keep it around. People are always like, oh, Adrafinil, I'll just get some Modafinil. Yeah, well, there's reasons why you want to keep Adrafinil around. So number one, let's talk about sublingually dosing Adrafinil. I did this years ago as an experiment. It was powerful. It worked well. My normal dose on Adrafinil is about 150 milligrams. I don't really require a whole lot of it. I don't want a whole lot of it. I don't want that extra super Afinil-like experience. If I I could get that in many other ways with phenylpiracetam and tyrosine stacks and triacetylurate and a bunch of other stacks. But with Adrafinil, normally I just kind of want to take a good modest dose and get it in there. My philosophy on nootropics is have a good solid baseline, get a nice solid noticeable bump above that baseline. So I normally take about 150 of oral Adrafinil if I'm going to take it, but sublingually, I found that I could dose it in just about 50 milligram quantities and get a pretty good result. 50 milligram quantities of sublingual Adrafinil and get a pretty good result. Now, your dose is going to vary. So, look, my dose on it orally is 150. I took it down 100 milligrams to get my sublingual dose. Now, as you go higher in the dose, that's going to change. So you might want to, if you normally take 300 milligrams of Adrafinil, rather than just minusing 100 and taking it down to 200 milligrams, and that's your sublingual dose, you might want to take it down 150, take it down to 250 total, and then sublingually dose it that way. Once you get up into the 300 milligram quantities on the dose range, you probably want to just half your dose on the sublingual protocol. I mean, that's a good actionable sort of takeaway. Just have the dose on the sublingual protocol if you're going 300 or above on Adrafinil. If that's where you normally are, just half it and take it that way. But I think a lot of folks are going to find, because sublingual is such a powerful administration method, and especially with a compound like Adrafinil, that's just like, wow. I mean, it works incredibly. I think you're going to find that you're not going to need a whole lot. You might even be able to split the dose more than half. So if you take 300, you might only need 120 or 130. You might not need the whole 150. But you're going to have to experiment wisely. But I would say start with a template of splitting it in half if you're doing 300 or more normally orally, so that your sublingual dose is 150, and then I guess titrate in 20 or 30 milligram increments down and or up from there to find your sweet spot. You might not find your sweet spot right away. This is something I tell people. Look, they get impatient. They take a nootropic once and they go, "Is this it? This is it." I saw somebody on a Facebook group recently who's like, I tested myself on 20 milligrams of Noopept, and here were the results. Next, I'm doing on oxiracetam. I'm like, really? Next, you should do 15 milligrams Noopept. And next, you should do 15 milligrams Noopept, 300 milligrams choline bitartrate. Next, you should do 15 milligrams Noopept, 100 milligrams alpha GPC. Next, you should do 150 milligrams alpha GPC, 15 milligrams Noopept. You see, you can't just test in that regard. You can't just test your response to testing in response to nootropics based on one dose. You've got to find the most perfect, most optimal dose, and that's how you're really going to tell, because people would look at that and go, oh, well, he did relatively okay in reaction speed after taking Noopept. That means it's not that impressive. Well, he could have taken it better. He could have got a more optimized dose. He could have had a more optimized choline source, on and on and on and on. So folks just need to do a whole lot of experimenting. So you might need to titrate in 20 to 30 milligram increments to get this sublingual dose of Adrafinil down, but that is what I suggest. Now, I want to talk about traveling with Adrafinil, because here's the thing about Adrafinil. It's legal to have in the United States. Okay, it's essentially not regulated, so it's a supplement. That's what's so cool about it. You basically have Modafinil that's legal to have, in Adrafinil. Sure, you got to take a little bit, higher doses of it, and sure, the effects might, for some folks, they report that they're not exactly quite the same. They're pretty darn close to me. I really don't notice much of a difference whatsoever. I don't care if I need to take a little more or if I just need to sublingually dose it. But the cool part about it is it's scheduled as a supplement. It's not scheduled. It's just a supplement. It's unregulated. So you could buy Adrafinil, like say you're in the United States of America, and you take a trip somewhere where like you might have procured modafinil in some way that like is outside of the realm of your doctor or something, right? And so like technically having it somewhere else might not be legal. Like you travel with it or something, technically having it might not be legal. So if you can get your hands on some Adrafinil, which like a lot of the major powder sellers have it, like Nootropic likely has a Nootropics Depot, Nootropic Source, Lift Mode. Those are the most trustable companies. And you have some Adrafinil, it's like boom, you're good. You could sublingually dose Adrafinil in a half dose compared to your regular Adrafinil dose. And then be rocking and basically have a modafinil-like effect somewhere when you're traveling, where if you took the modafinil that you had, if you procured it under other means besides a prescription from a doctor, then you wouldn't have to be concerned about you like getting pulled over and someone finding your modafinil stash or something. And so that's something to think about. Recently, I went to the Jersey Shore. I was there basically to kind of hang out and just look at water and stuff like that. But there was times when I wanted to work. I brought my laptop. I was working some of those times, and I brought some Adrafinil. I threw some sublingual Adrafinil down, somewhere around 100 milligrams, and I was on fire, ready to go and primed. And I didn't have to, bring any modafinil. So that's one really good strategy. Adrafinil is basically like a supplement in the United States. I mean, it's amazing. It's a very, very powerful compound, and it'll convert to modafinil in your liver, but it is legal to have and walk around with in the US of A. So that is one convenient strategy for carrying around Adrafinil. That's why it's important to keep Adrafinil in the arsenal, guys. Okay, so that is Adrafinil. It is basically modafinil. It'll convert to modafinil in your liver through a couple metabolic processes. It requires a little higher doses than modafinil. For me, it's a pretty similar effect. For most folks, it's basically a similar effect. Some folks say that modafinil might give them a little cleaner effect. Some folks also said that our modafinil gets them a cleaner effect, and that's not the case for me. I think it all really depends on how clean your brain is. I mean, how good do you feel? How normal do you feel? And how good functioning is your brain and body. So it's a powerful compound. The utility of it is exceptional, and sublingually dosing it is easy and convenient, and you can take it places where you couldn't take modafinil. That's one of the most powerful things about Adrafinil. Just have it around, keep it in the arsenal. And hey, if you ever end up in a pinch somewhere, this is the thing. You can get Adrafinil in these small little bags. If you're in a pinch somewhere and you just need good solid brain performance and you don't have any other nootropic, Adrafinil's pretty darn reliable for brain performance, okay? It's pretty darn reliable. It's going to work pretty consistently every time, unless you're one of those funky people who just don't respond to anything, in which case you got to look at what's going on with your neurochemistry. I can guarantee you're taking some other supplements or some other drugs or SSRIs. You made changes to receptor sites in your brain. You're not sleeping well, you're drinking, you're not eating well, one of those things. And that, my friends, has been the quick podcast on the mighty Adrafinil. Don't underestimate it. Okay? Don't throw it down there in the dungeons of the nootropics that you don't want to mess with. It is powerful. It'll convert to modafinil. You can take it sublingually, and it is freaking convenient. The mighty Adrafinil. That has been number 31. Tried to do a quick one on that one on the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. Check us out on the web at livecortex.com, on the blog at livecortex.com/blog. Hey, if you want to get updates on all of our content, go to livecortex.com. A pop-up thing will pop up and say, hey, put your email address in to get updates. We send these out pretty frequently because we're posting content every day, multiple times a day. So basically it's, hey, here's our content, here's the podcast, here's the video, here's the 9 reasons you get brain fog and racetams. That's the thing we just did. Video we just did on the YouTube channel. Check us out on YouTube at the Cortex Labs Nootropics and Smart Drugs YouTube channel. If you've not tried the Cortex Stack, get the Cortex Stack. It is a natural version. We tried to make a natural version of modafinil. Very powerful stack. The thing's epic. Get it at livecortex.com. The digital guides that we wrote, the Racetam God Guide and Smarter, Better, Faster, get those at livecortex.com. Those are exceptionally powerful guides. By the way, you can get both of those for $29 if you use the coupon code 29. On the menu, there's a place where it says Combo Nootropics Books. You can get the Smarter, Better, Faster, and the Racetam God Guide together. Normally, the combo is $42, but if you enter the coupon code 2929, you can get it for $29 and download them and read them and get the 100+ stacks and all those guides. And then if you need stack consulting, hit me up. We have it on the website, livecortex.com. We can make your stack perfect. It's 40 minutes on a call with me. It is 15 additional email correspondences. Most of our calls are video chats, so we just Skype and talk about nootropics. Very powerful, but you'll walk away with powerful stacks. You'll walk away with questions answered, whatever you want from the consult. Get it at livecortex.com. Thank you so much for being with me. We'll talk to you next time.